Hello and welcome to audio-visual lecture series on political science. Today we are going to discuss chapter 2 titled as The End of Bipolarity from your class 12 NCERT textbook Contemporary World Politics. Now in these chapters we will discuss the end of bipolarity in the war or the fall of communism. For understanding, we divide this chapter into four parts. In these four parts, we will discuss what was Soviet system, what were the main problems with the system, why did USSR disintegrate, what is shock therapy, and what are the consequences of disintegration of the Soviet Union. Along with this, we will also discuss India's position during the Cold War era in the war or international politics. So, today, let's begin by understanding what is bipolarity and what was Soviet Union. As you know, the Fall of Berlin War in Germany in 1989 was a dramatic event, and it led to a change of events that affects the natures of world politics. In these chapters, we will discuss some of these important events. These are the collapse of the Second World War. First war is the developed capitalists, and the second war is the socialist war, and the third war include all the developing countries like India and many of the other Asian countries and countries from Latin American and African continent. So in these chapters we will discuss many things like the end of Cold War and unifications of Germany. We will discuss the liberation of East European countries and the disintegration of the Soviet Union. And all this event together implies the end of bipolarity, and the chapters also titled as the end of bipolarity. Now, to begin, let us first understand what is meant by bipolarity. Bipolarity refers to the basic structures in the international system when it is dominated by two superpowers, such as by USA and USSR during the Cold War era. The bipolar balance of power was also a superpower rivalry between the East and the West bloc, and large number of nations or state aligns themselves or with two superpowers, either with USA or USSR. Now, what had happens after the end of the Second World War? As you know, the war was divided into these two blocks, that is the superpower, the USA or the USSR. They supported different sides in conflict during the Cold War, especially in African nations such as Vietnam War, Afghan War, which often were the battleground for rivalry between the two power blocks. So this era was characterized by fear and mutual suspicions between the two major powers. But fortunately, this confrontation never became a full-fledged war. The Western bloc headed by US was advocating the ideology of capitalism and democracy, whereas the Eastern bloc headed by the USSR was advocating ideology of socialism and communism. We have came across these two terms many times. What are the differences between socialism and capitalism? The central division between the two schools of thought emerged from the idea of economic equality and the role of government. Now, while the capitalists believe in democratic forms of governance and liberal market, whereas the socialists believe in central planning and controlling and authoritarian forms of government. The mantra of socialism is that from each according to his ability to each according to his need. The goal of economic equality in socialist society can be achieved through free or subsidized healthcare, education, social security, and by taking higher taxes from the rich people. Now, taking care of the needs of every citizen became the responsibility of the state and the socialist structures, whereas in the capitalist rule of the state, it is less, and development of economy is left on the market forces of demand and supplies, and the competition among the people. Whosoever win the competition tend to emerge more better. Now, the ideological war was rooted in this debate, that is, which system is better than the other, and the whole war is got divided between these two blocks in terms of adopting with forms of social and political organization. Now, after the end of the Second World War, the whole countries of Eastern Europe that were liberated by the Soviet army from the fascist occupation came under the control of USSR. These countries were held together by a military alliance known as Warsaw Pact, with the USSR being the leader of this group. The USSR was the union of subnational Soviet republic where Russian SFSR, that is Soviet Federative Socialist Republic, also refers to as Soviet Russia, was the dominant republic among all. Ukrainian SSR, today known as Ukraine, then Uzbek SSR, Uzbekistan, Kazakh SSR, Kazakhstan, Belarusian SSR, Belarus, Azerbaijan SSR, Azerbaijan, Georgian SSR, Georgia, Tajik SSR, Tajikistan, Moldavian SSR, Moldavia, Kyrgyz SSR, Kyrgyzstan, and the Lithuanian SSR, Lithuania, Turkmen USSR, Turkmenistan, and then Armenia SSR, Armenia, Latvian SSR, Latvia, Estonian SSR, Estonia. So the Berlin Wall was constructed by the German Democratic Republic GDR in 1961. Why was this war built? This war was built when the Cold War was in its peak, and this war built in order to divide the city of Berlin into two parts. The Berlin Wall was considered to be one of the greatest symbols of the Cold War. So let us see the one of the map. So here, after the end of the Second World War, Germany was divided into four zones. It's under the control of one of the Allied power, that is the USA control one part, and the United Kingdom control another part, France and the Soviet Union. Similarly, the Berlin was also divided into four different parts, that is we have seen from the map. And then from the next slide we have seen the blue line, which is the Berlin Wall, which is dividing the Germany into two parts. So after that we have seen this is the pictures of the one of the pictures of the war. So which divided the whole city, that is Berlin city, into east and west. So the Union of Soviet Socialist Republic USSR came into being after the Socialist Revolution in Russia in 1917. The revolution was inspired by the idea of socialism as opposed to capitalism and the need for egalitarian society. So in this Russian Revolution in 1917, which was led by Vladimir Lenin, founder of the Bolshevik Communist Party, and who was highly inspired by the Marxist theory, and the Soviet Union became a great power after the Second World War, and the Soviet economy was then more developed than the rest of the world except for the US. It had a complete communication network, vast energy resources including ore, iron and steel, machinery productions, and transport sector that connected its remotest area with efficiency. It had a domestic consumer industry that produced everything from pin to car, though their quality did not match that of the Western capitalist country, that is USA. The Soviet state ensured a minimum standard of living for all the citizens, and the government subsidized basic necessities including health, education, child care, etc. The Soviet system, however, became very bureaucratic and authoritarian, making life very difficult for its citizens. Lack of democracy and absence of freedom of speech stifled people who often expressed their dissent in jokes and cartoons. Most of the institutions of the Soviet state needed reform. The one-party system represented by Communist Party of Soviet Union had tight control over all institutions and was unaccountable to the people. So the party refused to recognize the hours of the people in the 15 different republics that formed the Soviet Union to manage their own affairs, including their cultural affairs. So Russia was only one of the 15 republics that together constitute the USSR. In reality, Russia dominated everything, and people from other regions feel neglected and often suppressed. In the arms race, the Soviet Union managed to match the US from time to time, but at a great cost. The Soviet Union lagged behind the West in technology, infrastructure, and most importantly, in fulfilling the political and economic aspiration of the citizens. So the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan in 1979 weakened the system even further. So though wages continue to grow, productivity and technology fell considerably behind that of the West. This led to shortage in all the consumer goods. Food import increased every year, and the Soviet economy was faltering in the late 1970s and became stagnant. And therefore, the Soviet system became a failure, and then United States of America, the capitalist system of government rising. So that is the conclusion of our discussion for today. In our next part, we will discuss the disintegration of Soviet Union.